In this part, we'll use everything that we learned from the previous lesson, and we'll build this custom thruster that is consisted from multiple layers, rings, and outer and inner noise elements. Okay, so it's always a good idea whenever you're creating these effects is to go to real world reference. There are a lot of images online that you can find, and you can even see how these thrusters are built and why are they creating these kind of ring elements. But the more you look into these, the more you start to notice that there are specific layers that you can basically use to mimic this look. All right, so you can see that this thruster is made out of this kind of outer plasma that is basically converges in multiple parts, and then in those parts you have rings in between, and then you also have some kind of flames. All right, so if you go back to this render, this is pretty much what is happening. So we're going to build this kind of outer plasma bulges first. Okay, so we are going to continue with this scene. We can use the same asset, and I'm actually going to use this same circle. So let's put down thruster exhaust. We're going to start with a clean thruster, and right away I want to increase the size of this, so I'm going to make the length somewhere like 2.28, so it's bigger. And in the exhaust I'm also going to turn off the noise, because we are mainly interested in this outer bulge shape. Now to get that shape, we are going to use this thickness ramp, and I'm going to set the interpolation to B-spline to have smoother curves, and we're going to start placing these. So if you want exact values, we can actually use the value and position numbers to adjust these. So the position of the first point I'm going to set to 0.95. Actually, no, it should be 0, and the value should be somewhere 0.4. So we're going to lift this one, and then the other end we're also going to lift up 0.4. And then I'm going to add one more point in here. So we're going to have shape more or less like a capsule. And the closer point to the right end, I'm going to set to 0.95 position. And maybe we can reduce the value here slightly, 0.85, something more like this. And then the other point closest to the left end, I'm going to set to 0.05, and we can set its value to 0.9. Okay, or you can keep it completely symmetrical, it's really up to you. And then in the center, I'm going to put one central point that is going to be the highest in this ramp. The other thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to enable the thickness, because we want the center to be hollow, as you can see. And we're going to set the thickness to somewhere like 435. Okay, so this is a good start. Now let's go to the exhaust. Like I said, I turned off the noise. We might use a little bit of distortion, but for now I'm mainly interested in this temperature and temperature scale. Scale along length rather. So let's click on the gear. Let's use black to orange, so we can get this kind of more fiery look in here. And the other thing that we can do, basically, we can intensify the outer edge more if we play with this ramp. So if we start putting one end, and then I can click here, I can add one more of this black color, and then I'm going to move this one closer. I click here and drag it to the opposite side. So we are going to get something more like this. So this works pretty similar like how you would do it to intensify the details in the fire. So it's almost creates this kind of inverse emission. And we can maybe set these to be 0.15 for the middle black on the left, and then 0.85 to the other side. Okay, and then additionally we can play with the scale along ramp. We can click here and it will have the end a bit brighter, so you can see this is what it did. Right, so this is our bulge element, and we need to copy this multiple times to achieve this kind of repetitive look. Okay, so we can utilize copy and transform. Okay, copy and transform, let's connect it after. And with copy and transform, we can define how many bulges we want. I'm going to set this to 5 and I'm going to offset it. So it basically connects with the end of the other one. So I think 1.8 is a good number, something like that. And again, if you don't want to see this kind of hard edge in here, you can go to the pyro exhaust and then you can maybe put the end to 0 and you're going to get a much smoother ending. So something more like that. Okay, so this eliminates that hard edge. Okay, so 1.8 in here, and then I also want to be able to scale this down in X and Y axis. So I'm going to select the X axis, right click, copy parameter, then I'm going to select the Y axis, right click, paste relative reference. So now I can adjust the X and it will adjust the Y as well. So we got this kind of procedural taper for this. Okay. Okay, so this is our outer bulge element. Now we want to create the rings that are gonna be in between of these. Right, so we're gonna start with another pyro thruster. So pyro thruster exhaust, and then in here we can play with the settings. So you can change this thickness in here with a preset. If you click on the gear, you can use hill, so it will give us something like that. Let's actually take a look at this. So we right away have something looking like that, very thin. And then in the exhaust, I'm going to turn off the noise. Okay, so we got something more like this. And let's change the color to black to orange. And then we can go back to the general tab, and then we can add some adjust thickness a little bit. So let's set it to 0.35, something more like that. And then I can also adjust the scale. We can play with the scale a bit later. Let's copy this one and see it together with the other. So I'm going to select this copy, hold Alt, click and drag to the side. I'm going to connect this output here. And now we should have the rings. So we can basically merge these two and see how they look together. Okay, so the rings are now not in the location where I want them. And also we are actually experiencing the same problem. If we just merge, it will copy the look in the viewport from the first volume. So we can actually have this one on display and press Control Shift and click on the template flag to see the rings better. All right, so we would like to offset these rings a little bit. So I'm going to put a transform, because I want the first ring to start a little bit in the end of the first bulge. So let's move it somewhere here, maybe 1.5 or even maybe 1.1. The other thing we can do is we can pretty much stretch these rings if we need to. So we can increase this to be somewhere like 2.5. Okay, so we get something more like that. Okay, so this is more or less the position. Maybe we can position them more in the center. And then obviously you can adjust the uniform scale in here, so we can probably make the rings a little bit smaller, somewhere like 0.85, and now we have them right inside. So now we got some cool looking thruster. But if I press play, nothing is happening with this, and we actually want to have some sort of action on the inside or maybe on the outside. So let's go ahead and add some distortion. So in the first pyro exhaust, I'm going to go to distortion. I'm going to enable this, and we just need a little bit. We don't need much. So I'm going to set this to 0.1. Okay, and then I'm going to go to the second one, and I'm probably going to use the same value here. So 0.1 and 0.1. So now if I press play, these would be much more dynamic. Okay, so we got one of the hardest parts actually in. The rest would be additional layers on top, which is going to be much simpler, right? So it's actually pretty hard. It was pretty tricky to come up with the way to make these kind of bulges look like that by using just this one node, but here we are. Okay, so let's add another pyro exhaust. So this one is going to be more layer on the top, so it's going to be an overall kind of air distortion on top of this. So again, pyro exhaust. Okay, so we can maybe turn everything off, and I'm just going to connect the circle here. All right, so this one we are going to set to bigger length, something like 15. Okay, and then we're going to play with this ramp a little bit. Maybe we can adjust the positions. Let's set it to B-spline, and I'm going to make it more curved like that. Something more like this should be good. Okay, so it will have this kind of shape. Let's see the numbers. So maybe 8 to 5, and this one is 5 to 5, something more like that. So you have like a much closer result to what I'm having. And then we can adjust the thickness. Let's turn on the thickness. I'm going to set it to 0.75, so it will have some volume deleted from the center, but not all of it. And then we can also increase the uniform scale to 1.15. Okay, so we got something like that. Now let's go to the exhaust. So this one is going to be heavily noised up. So we're going to set, we're going to keep the first noise. I'm going to reduce the element size to 0.15. And then we can also add some blend, maybe 75. Okay, so it attracts more to the center. Then we're going to add some distortion in here. Set it to 0.1. And the element size should be also a bit smaller. But again, keep you can play with these as you like. You can create your own stylized outer element from any specific reference that you need. Okay, so we have this. Then I want to reduce the temperature because I don't want this to be very prominent. So something more like that. Okay, so this is just going to be on top of those two. And then we can adjust the temperature along length. So we can do something more like a hill. Let's set it to B-spline. And let's maybe do something more like that. So the other end is going to be 0.566, and this one should be pretty much in the center, 0.5 and 1. Yeah, so that's basically what it is. Okay, so we got this. Now we can take a look at 3 of these. Again, if I merge these, I'm gonna start losing the different look. Like, it's gonna be visible in the render, but in here it doesn't really. Yeah, it will just make everything orange. So I'm gonna have a display flag on this first layer, then Control-Shift-Click on the template to get the rings, and Control-Shift-Click on this outer. And now we have this additional outer layer that is gonna look, that's gonna make it feel more interesting and dynamic, especially on the outer edge. And keep in mind, we can have this temperature like that, and then we can boost it in the shader. We can make it much brighter. Okay, and then let's add one last layer. It's going to be just a core. I want to have some kind of more interesting core on the inside. So another pyro thruster exhaust. Okay, and let's quickly adjust its settings. So let's set the length quite high as well. So I'm gonna set it to something like 18.5. Okay, and then we are going to adjust the jitter length. So this is going to be jittering forward and backward. Then we can adjust the uniform scale. Can make it a bit bigger. Okay, and what else can we do? Yeah, the rest should be fine. Let's play with the exhaust a little bit. So we can increase the noise here. 0.25. What else can we do here? So we can maybe add some distortion. So we can make it like 0.1 more or less. And now I'm gonna do something interesting with the temperature. So I'm gonna reduce the temperature scale a bit, but then in the scale along length we can actually use a hill preset here as well. So if we do that, it will mainly keep that core closer to the end, so it will have this very interesting look. All right, so that's our last layer pretty much. Again, feel free to adjust all of these, but this is what we got. So we got some interesting core, we got the rings, we got the outer edge, and this is all going to be amplified in the shader. So let's also control shift click on this rocket to check. Yeah, we got some nice layers in there. All right, so the next step would be taking all of this and making sure that we have all these volumes. So you can see when we copy, we actually have a lot of densities, a lot of temperatures, same here, and we need to make this a combined volume for rendering. Okay, so in the next steps we're going to take a look at that. Okay, so this is how we're going to do this. We're going to start with one layer at a time, and each of these would have density and temperature. We're going to split those. Press tab, type a split. We're going to split density and temperature. So in the split, in the group, we can just click on the drop down, choose density, and there we go. We only have density. Density is not going to be visible, but it will be needed for rendering. And you can see we currently have 5 densities for each copy. So we are just going to combine them into one. So we're going to use VDB, combine, and the option we want to use here is the first input is A, so we're going to say flatten all A, and then we're going to set the operation to be maximum. So it will take all the densities and flatten and combine them like Photoshop layers into one, and use maximum values from each. Okay, so again, we don't see it here, but if we do the same thing for the temperature, it's just going to be one temperature and one density, and then we can basically merge these back. Okay, and then this will be our first layer. So we can set the output, press tab, null, and I'm going to set this to be out flame outer. Okay, now let's do the same thing to the others. I can actually copy this, can select these nodes, hold alt, click and drag. So we're gonna do it for this one, and we're gonna do it for the other ones. Actually, these two we can combine together. So let's merge these. This will be our separate layer. Yeah, since this is all one color, and then we'll combine them separately. Okay, so this will be our flame outer. This will be our flame rings. And then this other one would be our flame noise plasma. Just say out plasma noise. All right, so now all the layers are ready for import into Solaris and rendering, and this is what we will do in the next part.